Hello to everyone who's joined us so far. Thank you for being patient with us. We had a technical difficulty. We're going to take a few minutes to allow more people to join us today, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Well, good morning. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you all to our 24th webinar in the Coffee With series, sponsored by the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership at Seton Hall University. I'm Reggie Lewis, the center's executive director, and it's great to greet all of you who've logged on today from places around the United States and abroad to take part in our conversation with the Mary Kimonye, the Principal Administrative Secretary and Accounting Officer in the State Department for Public Service, Republic of Kenya. There's more to her title, but the full intro comes a little later. Today's webinar helps the center to mark its celebration of Women's History Month, a time to highlight the effectiveness and enormous contributions of women leaders around the world. The Coffee With series provides the center the opportunity to showcase the inspirational stories of servant leaders and the endless ways in which individuals, organizations, and society in general can be transformed by the power of servant leadership, a philosophy in which the leader first seeks to serve. And I assure you that today's guest will not disappoint. In a few minutes, we will, of course, formally introduce our guest, but before we proceed any further, a quick word about the Center for Servant Leadership. For nearly 60 years, the Greenleaf Center has worked to promote the awareness, understanding, and practice of servant leadership. In addition to the Coffee With series, other core programs include the annual Public Policy Lecture, which features thought leaders and issue experts from a range of sectors who apply a servant leader's perspective to current policy challenges. The Greenleaf Scholars, which funds researchers whose work promote the efficacy and impact of servant leadership. The center also exposes high school and college students to opportunities to develop lives of service through our Next Generation initiative. And through our outside engagements, we proudly work closely with organizational partners as they implement the practice of servant leadership throughout their workplace culture. Now, the moment that we've all been waiting for. It is indeed my honor, truly my honor, to formally introduce today's guest, Mrs. Mary Kimonye. It was February of 2020 when His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, then the President of Kenya, appointed Mary Kimonye as the Principal Administrative Secretary, Accounting Officer in the State Department for Public Services in the Ministry of Public Service, Youth, and Gender for the Republic of Kenya. Mrs. Kimonye received her MBA and Bachelor of Commerce degrees from the University of Nairobi. She previously taught as a lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of Business. In 2007, she served as technical advisor at the Public Sector Reform Secretariat and was instrumental in implementing results-based management in government. In 2009, Mrs. Kimonye was appointed as the founding chief executive officer of the Brand Kenya board, where she served with distinction until 2015. In addition to recognition of her distinguished service and contributions to national government, national development, Mrs. Kimonye was awarded the Moran of the Burning Spear in 2011 by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya. There's no better person we could have thought of to help us celebrate Women's History Month here in 2024. Mary, are you ready? Do you have some coffee over there? And
Yes,
I,
I
I was
am
gonna
ready.
say that this is like a Kenyan brand coffee, but it's a Catholic university, and so somebody would catch me up in that story. But anyway, uh, I am also uh, by virtue of our wonderful relationship with you, now going to reverently refer to you as Mary throughout this interview. And we'll open by paying homage. Again, we're in the month of March, Women's History Month. And so before we allow the audience to get to know a bit more about you and your incredible work as a servant leader, Mary, is there a particular woman in your life who has inspired you and your work? Who might that person be?
Thank you very much, Rigi, and thank you for that elaborate curriculum vitae. For a moment, you lost me. I was not sure whom you're describing, but here we are. Now the people know me. About paying homage to a woman who inspired me. As you know, Rigi, our life is full of turns and twists, as you say it, and is full of moments and is full of different periods. So I have quite a number as I went through from my formative years to where I am now. So very early on when I was a young girl, there was my grandmother who taught me the values of integrity and the values of the power of silence when that is required. She had that demeanor of not answering everything that has been asked. Then later there was my mother. My mother taught me very hard lessons of self-reliance, because from a very early age, I had to take part in domestic work along with her, and also gardening, and also helping her look after children. She had 11 of us, and she was also living with several cousins, as it is common in the African setting. Then in my later years, I got a very, very special woman. This one is special. And this is my mother-in-law, whom I lived with. We had a relationship for 34 years. And in that 34 years, I can tell you it was joy, laughter. I never had a moment when I got angry or disappointed in that lady. She was very gentle, easy on the eye and easy on the ear, and very, very concerned with people. She taught me great lessons that have helped me in the public service. She was married to an administrator, a colonial, what we would call colonial chiefs, who was very tough and hard, but she managed with soft power. So she taught me emotional intelligence and soft power. Then there is a whole range of women all over the world. Wangari Maathai's, Johnson Sharif. I also admire Nancy Pelosi because of her staying power and teaching that age is nothing but a number. You can continue. So there you go, Reggie.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, what a powerful council of women with Grandmom
And
Mom.
Rich, I forget my two daughters who are like breaks in my life.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
What are their
Yeah,
names?
Victoria, who is a doctor. Victoria Kanana, who is a doctor and works in Kenya with the Ministry of Health. And Michelle Karemi, who is a lawyer and works with one of the top 5 law firms in Kenya called Bowman's.
Wow.
Those ones are just like tsunami. They tell me you are poorly dressed and you're not living up to standard and so on.
Wow.
So thank you.
No, thank you. Talk about blessings. And speaking of childhood memories, what were some of your fondest childhood memories? And I would imagine there might be a few with both grandmom and mom. So tell our audience just one or two of your fondest childhood memories.
Childhood
And
memories.
also where you grew up. I should have started there. Where you grew up.
I grew up in rural Kenya, in the central part around the Mount Kenya region. Those who may want to pick the map of Kenya, it's a cold agricultural. I grew up on proceeds. My father was a peasant farmer being helped by my mother. So our schooling and our livelihood was supported by what came out of the farm. They were not in formal employment. And that was mainly tea and coffee, which we would help tend during the school holidays. And if you're not doing that, then you are doing the cooking and cleaning of the house. They were very hardworking, so my life was not deprived. We were able to get all the necessities that we needed from the farm. So my fond memories is just being in that bush, walking bare feet and playing around with numerous cousins and neighbors. And then when I was about 10, I can't quite remember. I was in that should have been, I don't know, maybe like 5 years after. When did these guys go to the moon? When did they go to the moon, Rich?
In 1969?
1969. So you can say about 8 years after that. I was very young, just in primary then. My teacher is now passed on. In one of the class sessions after he had taught me for a year, he called me and he had put the picture of Armstrong and his team.
Okay.
And he told me, out of this class, you're the one headed in this direction. And that has remained with me for life.
Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah.
And so that leads me to my next question about clearly you at an early age signaled to all around you that there was a natural born leader in the midst. But I'm curious, and I think our audience would be curious as to where did you see yourself going when you thought about a future career path as you were in that bush barefoot and all that? Where did you see yourself going?
When I was first and foremost, I saw myself going. I really loved reading, so I saw myself going to the highest level of education. And my father, who was not educated at all, kept on saying that he wants me to read until I am tired of it.
Okay.
And yeah, and he wanted me to be a teacher.
Okay.
Because then teachers were really highly esteemed. But I had other ideas. I wanted to be a bank manager. So when I finished my BCom, Bachelor of Commerce, I applied work to the banks. And I was admitted on first application in a bank, worked there for 8 months and decided, no, this is not my career. Yeah, I think the power of the parent's tongue cannot be overruled. I become philosophical about that, because then after 8 months in the bank, I went back to the university to do my master's, and I got a bachelor. I got an MBA, and after I got my MBA, then I was admitted as a junior professor or lecturer. In Kenya, we call them lecturer. In America, you call all of them professor, at the University of Nairobi in my former faculty. And I taught there for many, many years until 1997. From 1991 to about 1997 and 2007.
Well, we did a little digging, of course, Mary.
Yeah.
We got through some of the national security over there. We found out about you walking away from banking after 8 months. And then we also learned that in your role as a lecturer, you found tremendous satisfaction, so much so that you referred to it in one interview as the priceless experience. Tell us more about why it was so priceless.
Yeah, besides the people God has put in my life, teaching is like my second love.
Okay.
I don't know. It is priceless because you can look at a change process in a young person. You look at this person who comes to you without knowledge of a particular subject, and you follow them through. They become an expert, they pass their examinations, they go to university, they go on to a career. I can assure you, Rigi, in the current government in Kenya, I have more than 200 students from my classes who are either ministers, principal secretaries, CEO of state corporations and companies. And it is just nice to watch them refer to you as my teacher, and they have all these smiles on their faces. So that is really satisfying. And then teaching was in Kenya not a well-paying career. So I knew very well deep down me, I wasn't working for money. I must have been working for a higher calling. But you know what, Rigi? The job then became monetarily paying, because when I was at the University of Nairobi then, the skills that I gained in management and that got me working with a women's group called the National Council of Women of Kenya, just as a consultant. And while I was there, I got a chance to travel to the United States in Mississippi. It's called Mississippi Consortium for International Development. I came there for leadership and women economic empowerment course. And I also got another one through the British Council and several others in that leadership section. But my turning point while I was teaching at the University of Nairobi is when I was a faculty leader, faculty representative for the Marketing Society, for the Banking Society. I became the faculty advisor for SIFE, Students in Free Enterprise. SIFE, you can Google, I don't know whether it's still alive, was then supported by the Walmart supermarket in the United States.
Yeah.
And what you do as a faculty, you have your students and you teach them economics, the operations of the market society, market system, financial management, personal development, and they go into a competition nationally. And when they enter that competition, the university that wins goes for a World Cup. So I had that responsibility to coach my student. And the first year of coaching, my university became number 2. But the line between the first and the second was so thin, the judges were conflicted. So they decided both teams would get to travel. So the team that won traveled to Canada, and my team traveled to the United States, Washington, D.C. And they had these nice programs interacting with the senators, the representatives, and everything. I got motivated. The following year, I coached my student, and they became number 1. And the reward was a travel to Paris.
Look at that.
For competition. And so when I came from Paris, I got a chance to present what had happened in the SAIF World Cup to a government official who had met casually, and she was a PS during the reign of the former president Kibaki.
I just want our audience to make sure they know that PS means principal secretary.
Secretary.
Yeah.
So then when she listened to me, she said, you know what? I have some work at the ministry. Would you like to volunteer to do this work? That's how I entered what you call the Public Service Reform Secretariat. And I got instrumental in working for the resource-based management, which Kenya was entering during that time. And that started my journey with the mainstream government. And it's through that program that I became the CEO of Brand Kenya, and on to a principal administrative secretary, and on to a PS. And now my station has changed, and I will correct what is in the internet later on.
Okay, well, before,
when you allow me.
No, it's actually when you allow me.
Yeah.
So for all of you out there, it's no secret here on this campus that I am a huge fan of Mrs. Mary Kimonye, and I can never say no to her, which is very dangerous. But before we go any further, I have to go back to something you said a moment ago, which is fascinating. You know, to be able to put your hands literally on 200 individuals who now constitute a pipeline of servant leaders for the nation of Kenya. That's incredible. And so I didn't want that fact
it's amazing.
To escape people. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
There could be more, because I taught for many years.
Yeah, I'm sure there are more. I'm sure there are more.
Yeah.
But speaking of Brand Kenya, and I just want folk to know out there that Mrs. Kimonye was the founding chief executive officer of the Brand Kenya board, and Brand Kenya works to strengthen Kenya's image and identity, as well as promote its reputation as an investment and tourist destination. Mary, what was the vision behind the creation of this wonderful organization?
The creation behind this wonderful organization was our president's vision, where he wanted to transition into a middle income status nation. And that is in our national development agenda, the then president. And therefore, it was found necessary that to do that, we needed to attract investment, we needed to up our trade, we needed to have inflows of factors of production and foreign exchange, and we needed to actually communicate Kenya into the world. Because then our research, which we did, is that Kenya's image was buried in the documented image of Africa. And the documented Africa then, through the media and other platforms, was a negative image of a country of child soldiers, war, famine, disease. And we wanted to extricate Kenya from that image, because it's a generalized image of 53 nations, all put together to be called Africa. And we wanted to communicate Kenya's brand assets to the world and tell them that Kenya was, by then, that time, for example, had 38% market share of the export of roses.
Did you say for the export of roses?
Yes, roses.
Wow,
yes,
that's incredible.
We expect flowers. Even now, our market share is still high. We were still expecting top quality coffee and tea, and our tea is unmatched and our coffee is unmatched. We also wanted to tell people out there that Kenya is the cradle of mankind. This is where mankind started, and we wanted to demonstrate our dominance in athletics. And also we wanted to demonstrate our dominance in world leadership. Obama had just become president. He's our son. So yes, we wanted to position this small country, which was doing so much for the world. And we are also the humanitarian capital of the world. We have 2 UN bodies here, headquartered. and we house more refugees than any other country because of the conflicts in Africa. We are also the media center of the world. So the CNNs and the skies of the world, when they report about Africa, they are usually, their bureaus are in Nairobi. So we wanted to say, when you hear this story reporting from Nairobi, it does not mean that is the character of Nairobi. It's just that they're reporting from here. There's report about Somalia from Nairobi, about Sudan from Nairobi, about Congo from Nairobi. And therefore Nairobi gets that image. And it was also the time when the pirates were very high in the Gulf of Aden, and they were being tried in one of our towns, Mombasa. And we needed to tell them the pirating is not happening in Kenya. So we had a story to tell, and we wanted to tell it. And I was given that responsibility of finding platforms to tell that story and identifying people to tell that story. So we told that story to investors, we told that story to governments, we told that story to thought leaders, and we told that story to everybody. And therefore, Brand Kenya was a strategy to create, enhance Kenya's attractiveness as a destination. I could go on for a year about Brand Kenya. You have to stop me.
Well, again, to tell the story, to correct the story, to share this beautiful narrative on all of the contributions that Kenya has made and continues to make to the world. And that is fantastic. Now, in that role, I want our audience to know that, again, another area. So Mary made her mark, obviously, in business, in higher education. And while doing all this, she occasionally would advise folk in the government space, and they apparently were so jealous that they had to get her inside. And so, so we mentioned earlier that Mary had been appointed in this role in the Department of Public Service, and in the with the responsibility of supporting the Ministry of Public Service, Youth and Gender. If you could just briefly say what that portfolio entailed and how it has altered the lives and conditions of women and youth in the nation of Kenya, and why that's even important, because I mean, obviously Kenya is still a young nation with respect to the demographic there of young people.
Okay, now, Richie, what happened in 2017? I was called in to be a technical advisor for the then Minister for Public Service, Youth and Gender. And after I did some bit of a short stint up to 2018 as a technical advisor, I was then appointed as the Principal Administrative Secretary. That would mean the Deputy PS, if you want to say it that way. But then at that particular time, the ministry is Ministry of Public Service and Gender. So the ministry is divided into two state departments, the Gender Department and the Public Service Docket. So I took charge of the Public Service Docket, and a colleague took charge of the Gender Docket. Now, under the Public Service Docket, that ministry has the responsibility of managing the human resource in the public service, designing training programs, and managing what we call common cadre, all the drivers, all the secretaries, all the clerks, all the human resource in the entire government. So that is the work I was doing of policy development. And some of my key contribution then was a policy on dignity at work. I also shepherded the department through COVID. So I was able with my team to document the regulations for managing the public service during and after COVID and developing. And then it is also the department charged with mental health in the public service. So I had that advantage of revamping the mental health unit and training mental health champions who are then spread all over government for early detection of depression or any unstable behavior among the public servants. So that is a very critical department in the entire public service. So after I served from 2019 to 2020, about 1 year, then the then president appointed me as the principal secretary of the same department, and I continued with the same assignment. And it is also the department that deals with succession management, deployment of staff, staff development, and etc. and etc. And I served as a principal secretary from yes, it is 2010 February. The picture you have there, I was then being given that duty of a PS by the president up to when we went to the general elections in 2022. And I finished my tour of duty as a principal secretary. And now got into the current position which I am in, the office from which I'm taking this meeting. It is called the Executive Office of the President. And I had a unit called Governance and Public Service Reforms and Reengineering. So that is my current assignment as it is.
And it's in this critical role for His Excellency William Ruto, that we met,
yes,
which allowed for a partnership between
absolutely.
the government, the Republic of Kenya, the United Nations Development Program, and the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership here at Seton Hall University, in which we were able to conduct workshops with 51 principal secretaries last year, workshops on the practice of servant leadership.
Absolutely.
And it's important for our audience to know that this aligned with the vision of His Excellency President Ruto in creating a more citizen-centric public service in light of your wonderful manifesto as a nation with respect to improving services for all citizens. Can you speak to that partnership? And I know it's still early,
yes.
but what kind of what's the evidence of, or is there any evidence of an emerging shift in tone and expectation as it relates to the delivery of services?
Definitely there was, because after that training triggered a whole series of other capacity building for top levels of government, because it opened our minds to areas that we needed really to focus on. And what happened after that is that we started a very aggressive governance program within the public service. And so that to improve levels of transparency, accountability, citizen participation, and inclusivity in terms of managing the public resources. Because the principal secretaries are the ones charged with that. So that is something that it triggered. And then, of course, you are going to be having a lunch with the secretary to the cabinet. The interest for servant leadership still triggers. And also, as a basis of rolling out that servant leadership, we found it necessary to have what we called an attitude and culture change within the public service. So we went through a program designed by the Good News Church of Korea on mindset, just preparing your mindset for either to say no to certain things or to amplify the good things, and refocusing yourself on those God-given talents and principles that you have. So I would say it was a good program for us. And now under the governance program, and in an effort to adopt the servant leadership, we have our constitution talks about the power of the people and the people owning the power. It is also has a chapter on the Bill of Rights. And so to be able to serve the people that way, we are emphasizing adoption of 2 articles in our constitution. Article 10 on national values values of patriotism, national unity, participation of the people, human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, integrity, good governance, accountability, and transparency. Because the Constitution says it binds all public servants and all public state officers. So for them to be able to embrace that, then they need servant leadership, because that is all about servant leadership. And then another article is Article 232, which is the values and principles of governance or public service, like provision of prompt, efficient, effective, and impartial services to the citizens, accountability again, and transparency, meritocracy in hiring of people, mentorship. So all those values, responsiveness to the people. Now, the evidence of the emerging tone then is in a whole range of ways. In the public service now, we are having ministries develop what we call CPPs, corruption prevention plans.
Corruption prevention plans.
Yes, which will trigger then system audits so that we can know weak points. Then the government has just rolled a big program on digitization of the citizen-facing services and embedding services on the e-platform so that citizens can receive their services quicker and cheaper. Then we have programs on wage bill containment so that we can deal with the resources of the people. That was part of servant leadership. And we have mentorship programs in a whole range of areas. And then there's one aspect which now our president is emphasizing, and that is the whole of government approach. The whole of government approach to ensure that we deal with issues of waste, delays, overlaps of mandate, and so on and so forth. There you go, Lee.
Well, it's clear that our friends over there working in the His Excellency Ruto's administration, largely because of you and that winning smile, no one's getting any sleep as they adopt this servant leadership platform. But you all are to be commended for Articles 10 and 11 to push an agenda of national values, but also a government that is effective, efficient, and works for the people and always with the people in mind, citizen-centric. Yeah. Now, I have several young people in this office who are texting me and nudging me to stop hogging all the time with you.
Yes,
so we're going to move to the Q&A portion of our program. And I'm going to ask my brilliant young project manager, Gabby, to kick us off there. Of course, I could talk with you, Mary, all day. But Gabby, you're up.
For how long are we going to do that?
Thank you, Richie. Thank you, Richie. And thank you, Mrs. Kimonye, for being here with us today. So our first question comes from Rick, who says, when you were teaching, did you explicitly reference the servant leadership philosophy to your students?
When I was teaching at the university, not in the words of calling it servant leadership, no, because then I had not encountered Rigi, because we only started this servant leadership program, but in the sense of emphasizing service to the community, yes. But I did not reference this particular one because then I wasn't aware of it then. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Rick has another question that says, have you run into any objections to your efforts to bring servant leadership across the organizations you serve?
Yes, of course. There's lots of headwinds because servant leadership means sacrifice. Mm-hmm. It means putting somebody else is ahead of you. And especially for people who are not driven by integrity, it is a very difficult testing ground for them. because then they are being called to manage resources and to do their work and to carry themselves sensitive and conscious of somebody else and to put somebody else first. That is not natural for the human being. So there's resistance to it all the time. Yes.
I you said that servant leadership is sacrifice. That's something that I'm gonna think about. Yeah.
Yes.
So another question, do you think women really are better leaders? And if so, why?
That is not a fair question, but I'll answer it to the best of my ability.
All is fair in love, Mary.
Be honest.
Yes, women, it is all about the season, the time, the situation. There are times if the situation demands characteristics that are more prone held by women than men, then a woman will emerge as a better leader. Like now when governments are changing to use a bit of soft power, collaboration, participation, listening, I find situations that require that women are more sensitive, just because they are wired to be mothers and they are wired to be who they are. But there are situations when also men emerge as better leaders, depending on the situation. But what has been proved and what we need to accept is that the women who have been given a chance, a majority of them have done well. And I just want to reference what happened during COVID. And I can't remember who did the evaluation, but they found that the countries who were headed by either women prime ministers or women presidents did better in their response to COVID than others, if that answers you.
So our next question is, what are ways in which you practice servant leadership in your role on a daily basis?
One of my most remarkable way is just having to mentor and support the people who work under me. I am very conscious that in terms of skills, competencies, I could be a mile ahead many of them, ahead of quite a number or many of them. And if I'm not careful, I could leave them behind. And they would be frustrated and involved and not included. And I think the team then would not perform to optimal standards. So I find myself forgetting my top level job and coming down to coach and mentor and direct and show people just how to do work. Yeah, and yes, and also some of my behaviors, like there are things I do for myself, other people will find it difficult to do because of their high positions and so on and so forth.
Well, that's wonderful for the people that work with you.
Yeah.
So in the interest of time, as we wrap up our celebration of Women's History Month here, we have one more question. So what is your advice for young women aspiring to take a similar path that you have in multiple fields?
Number one, first is to do the groundwork, the basics. Get the basics right. Get the right education, because that becomes a springboard. Then number two is self-development. And I always tell young women to find out what is it that makes them different, like personal branding, so that in a crowd, there's something that defines you and something that is relevant, authentic, and which somebody else needs. For example, if it's a corporate, if you want to be a CEO, then you have to stand out as possible material for CEO. So personal learning never stops. And then consistency in terms of your character. Let there be a convergence between your identity and your image. Your identity is who you believe you are, and your image is what other people see because of how you project yourself. So project yourself in a manner that there's consistency, and let people know, get what they, say what you mean, and let them get what you show. I don't know how to put the words. And then just cultivate emotional intelligence that allows you to know when to speak, when not to, whom to speak and whom not to speak, and have a whole range of do's and don'ts. I call them my non-negotiables, that whatever the situation, I'll not be caught doing this. And you can develop your own personal non-negotiables.
Wow,
Yes.
well, thank you. That is advice I will be taking with me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to everyone who logged on. We have a few announcements before we wrap up for today. So our first announcement is that the Greenleaf Scholars application portal is now open for researchers who are promoting the efficacy and impact of servant leadership through their research. We will be hosting an informational session on April 5th at 10 a.m. You can register with the QR code on the screen.
And Gabby, before you go on, I just want to make sure, Mary, we get some Kenyan scholars applying for this. So let's, I'm asking the team here to make a note to get some information over to Mary. So we'll get this over to you, Mary.
Okay, no problem. Whatever I can do to help.
Thank you. So you can also visit.
Is my time up? Reggie, do you want me to leave the meeting?
No, we've got just 2 more minutes with you, and then we're all going to get off the call.
Okay, no problem.
So you can use the QR code here to register for the info session, or it's also linked to our homepage at greenleaf.org. Our next announcement is that the nominations for our Servant Leadership Hall of Fame are now open. For more information, you can visit greenleaf.org, where you'll find the nomination instructions linked to our homepage. And lastly, we'd like to invite you to our next webinar with guest Paula DePerna. She will be joining us in our celebration of Earth Day to discuss her new book, Pricing the Priceless. You can register for the webinar with the QR code here, but we also have the registration linked to our homepage at greenleaf.org. Lastly, if you would like to stay connected with the Greenleaf Center, you can use the QR codes here to follow what we have to offer. And everyone that was on today, thank you so much. If you could please take a moment to complete the Zoom survey that will pop up after the webinar, we would really greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much for being.
And I want to thank you, Gabby. Thank you, team here for today's production. Mary Kimonye, on behalf of the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership here at Seton Hall, thank you for helping us to celebrate Women's History Month. Thank you for being an exemplar of servant leadership. The people of Kenya are better off for all that you do. So blessings to you, and I look forward to seeing that smile again very, very soon.
Thank you to you and your team. It was a pleasure being on your platform, Reggie and the team. Thank you.
All right, see you soon.
Take
care,
care,
everybody.
Yes.